Hi, I'm Justin Barrett, president of Blueprint 1543.
And I am Ana Avila. Welcome to this Integrated Life, a podcast for those who seek to engage with life's biggest questions using the tools of the sciences with theology. Justin, welcome back to another episode. How are you feeling? Are you excited?
Oh, I'm excited to do another episode.
Yay. Yay. I think
Yay!
the last one was really fun. We got to react to Friends. If you guys haven't seen that episode, you should. It was really funny. And we enjoyed our conversation about evolution and Phoebe's perspective against
Oh,
Ross's
Phoebe.
perspective. She's the best. I love her. But today we're going to go a different direction. We're not going to talk about evolution or controversies between Bible interpretation. We're going to talk about brains and screens and child development. And I know those are things you enjoy talking about and that you know a lot about.
And
This
you too.
conversation, yes, I do. This conversation was inspired by a book that I'm very excited has come out very recently, both in English and Spanish. So if you are a native Spanish speaker who are listening to us, we know we have a few of those. Thank you for being here. The book is The Anxious Generation, Una Generación Ansiosa by Jonathan Haidt, and it's out. You can read it,
Oh,
and I think people should. What I've heard so far, I've started listening to the book. I've heard a couple of interviews by Jonathan Haidt, and I find it really intriguing, and it's what we're going to discuss today. But before, Justin, you just mentioned something behind the scenes that I had to include in our episode. You said you went to McKay's. For those who don't know what McKay's is, please explain to us what you were doing there and show us what you got from your trip to McKay's.
okay. Well, McKay's is a big warehouse style used bookstore. And they have other
Yes.
stuff for nerds like, you know, action
Action
figures and
figures,
video
puzzles,
games, puzzles,
board
uh,
games.
yeah, board games, video games, weird collectibles, music. They've got a really good music
Oh,
collection,
yes.
actually, and musical instruments, things like that. It is quite the place. A lot of fun to go to. And
Yes.
yes, I did go yesterday and pick up some
And
books.
you're going to show us what you got. That's always fun. Whenever I go visit Justin, a trip to McKay's or two is mandatory, and I
That's so she
get too
won't
many
steal
things.
my books.
And I still do sometimes. But yeah, and not as many as I would if I didn't visit McKay's. So please show us the books you got.
Okay.
Yay, heavy bag. That's good.
All right. So let's see in no particular order. What do we have here? We have Sway, The Irresistible Pull of Irrational Behavior
Oh,
by Ori Bramfman and Ron Bramfman. Not super new, but this, it's sort of in that psychology kind of area where it's why do we seem to do irrational things? Why can't we resist that very well? So a little
wait,
bit
wait,
of
wait.
popular
How do
science there.
you pick?
What?
How do you pick that kind of popular psychology books? But because I know that there are many bad ones, and
There
you have
are.
when you we've gone together, and I show you something, you're like, no, don't get that, and then you got that one. What made you make call?
Well, first of all, it's only 75 cents. So
That's
that
always a
makes
good incentive.
that's that's a stronger incentive. Yeah, with a lot of the popular science books, I look to see things like, well, what are the credentials of the authors? Do they seem to be respected by other scientists? Are they scientists themselves who just have the gift of being able to write for the public? Um, and even if a book isn't necessarily thoroughly strong all the way top to bottom, sometimes it's helpful for me because especially in the psychology areas that I'll be able to figure out if they are getting things a little bit wrong or if something doesn't sound quite right. That's a good exercise for me too. So
Mhm.
when we're getting closer to sort of popular psychological science kind of stuff, I'm a little bit more forgiving because I figure I'll catch some of the mistakes, or I'll understand why they've simplified things the way they have or whatnot. But still, it's helpful for me to hear how communicators bring the science down to a level that we can easily consume and make it practical to real people's lives. And I think that's just good for me to, get better at and learn what people are talking about. So we've got Sway.
That's a fun name.
That's yep. Oh yes, I picked up some Stephen Hawking's A Briefer History of Time.
Oh,
Because his brief history of time wasn't brief enough, I decided to go for the briefer one.
yeah, nice.
It's got lots of nice colored pictures too and stuff.
Ooh.
So, we can
How
always
much was
learn a little
that
bit.
one?
Now this one was $5.50. So
That's expensive for McKay's, but it's a good author.
Yeah. Okay. What else do we have here? Oh yeah, this one I look forward to. Oh, That's Disgusting.
Ew.
By Rachel
Nice.
Hurst. And it's really on the psychology of emotions and our disgust mechanism in particular. Some of the funniest experiments in psychology are over disgust. And it's been a while since I've read many of them. And so I thought, well, check this out. And now this is a book that is blurbed by, authors on the back that I could recognize and at least in one case know. And I know that he does good work and he writes good stuff. So, yes, the subtitle here is Unraveling the Mysteries of Repulsion.
Ooh.
Okay. What else do we have? Oh, yeah. We have Overtreated. Why Too Much Medicine is Making Us Sicker and Poorer by Shannon Brownlee. The price on this was free. I found this in the free book bin.
What?
And I was drawn to it because I'm interested in problems these days about how various technologies, and medicines are one of those technologies, are actually causing or have the potential to cause new problems for us. Even if they do successfully solve old problems, they can sometimes create new problems in their wake. And that's something I'm concerned about. So what else do we have here? So many books. The Human Age. The World Shaped by Us by Diane Ackerman. 75 cents. 75 cents.
Nice. What's that about?
Well, it appears to be about how it is that we are changing our environment, the world around us in some really radical ways, and what impact that has on us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Again, similar to that last one, I'm very interested in these issues because there's no doubt humans are unusual in the degree to which we impact our own environments. And then that can have an adverse or a positive impact on how our nature develops in those new contexts.
Nice. And you talked a little bit about all of this in your writer, how do you pronounce your lectures?
Riddell lectures.
Riddell. Okay. I was
Riddell
very
Memorial
far off.
Lectures.
Riddell lectures. You can watch that on YouTube if you're interested. Yeah. It was really fun.
Let's see what else. Oh, this is an old kind of, not super old, but old enough that it's kind of classic. The Wisdom of the Crowds. Why the Many Are Smarter Than the Few. I'm not sure I can pronounce his name correctly. James Surowiecki? I don't know. 75 cents. Great deal.
Wisdom of Crowds.
Wisdom of Crowds. It turns out that now, I know I haven't read the book
Not
yet,
social media crowds, I'm assuming.
No, but this is the kind of thing like for a lot of problems, it's actually better to get the advice from a whole mess of people that are relatively independent advice from a whole bunch of other people than rely on any one person. So
yeah, there's a Bible verse about that. I only know it in Spanish. En la multitud de consejeros está la sabiduría.
Yeah, and that will be worked out in context like, so suppose we need to guess. This is one of these old American county fair kinds of things. Guess the
Mhm.
weight of the heifer.
Yes.
You know, the
Yeah.
young cow, right?
Okay.
And the heifer is a young female
I
cow.
didn't know what that meant.
So we're going to guess the weight of the heifer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one strategy might be just sort of rely on my own sense and say, well, okay, I know what heifers weigh, or figure out which one of the group of us, maybe there are 12 of us who have gone to the county fair together, and we
Mm.
say, well, who has the most expertise? We'll let them guess for us. Better is for each of us to guess independently, not discuss it, but each come up with our own thought and then average those numbers.
Mm.
That kind of stuff, at least in some contexts, actually is better problem solving than relying on expertise, strangely. At least
Makes
that's what
sense.
this
That's
is
what
about.
they do on some game shows, right?
That's
They-
right. Like Price is Right. Everybody's yelling,
yeah.
hey, no more. The problem is they're interacting with each other too, so they can
Yeah.
do silly things. This one's kind of fun. Mindware Tools for Smart Thinking by Richard Nesbitt.
Ooh.
I worked for a little while with Dick Nesbitt when I was at the University of Michigan. I was part of the culture, let's see what they call it, the culture and cognition program there. And he was one of the leaders of that program. Great guy, fun to work with. But this is kind of really summarizing a lot of his whole career of psychological research, showing where we've got tendencies to get certain kinds of reasoning wrong, but also how we can sort of make better use of our brains for getting things right. So I thought that's fun.
Ooh. I want that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna steal it next time I'm in Knoxville.
Well, maybe you will. I might have it read by then. Change Your Clothes, Change Your Life. This is a gift for my daughter, who is a stylist.
Oh.
And she
Rebecca would love the cover of that book.
Yes. And so my stylist daughter was looking for a good, quick, and easy reference, especially for some color theory work. And so found that because, you got to look good too, right?
Of course.
This is for my 8-year-old friend, Ruben.
Oh, yay.
How to draw Minecraft, Roblox, and Fortnite characters. So he's a very good artist for his age, but he seems to like to draw that sort of thing. Let's see. I found Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms on the free book stack. So I remember
I've never read Hemingway.
I liked that book in high school, as I recall. We'll see if I still like it. Hemingway has some edge to him, but
I've heard.
Let's see. Corduroy Takes a Bow. So we've got some children. Again, this was free. It was in the free books. And my son's girlfriend teaches little kids, and I thought maybe she could use some of this stuff. And When the Storm Comes, it's a beautiful looking book. And then my biggest book is this one. The last book, Praise and Worship
Songbook. Oh.
Yeah.
It's for you to learn to play songs or just to sing them? Oh, no, it's...
Well, yeah, it's got tablature and notes and so forth. I like to play on my ukulele usually, sometimes guitar. And I've just been, using printouts that I handwrite in the chords and things like this. This will save me some effort and maybe...
Cool.
What's kind of fun about this one too is it includes old hymns as well as more contemporary worship songs too. So I'm excited.
Well, contemporary for when it was printed.
Yeah, it is at least into the 2000s. So
nice. Good finds.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
I'm personally offended that you didn't get anything for me. But again, all of your books could be for me, and I'll probably steal one or two when I'm there. So beware. If I'm warning, it's not stealing. It's just forcibly borrowing without planning to return it. I don't know. Well, Justin, thank you for sharing. And if you're ever in the Tennessee area, you should visit McKay's. This is not a sponsored, but they should sponsor us because we do spend some money there once.
Yeah, yes, we do. It's been known to happen.
Okay, Justin. Now let's get into the topic of this conversation. Jonathan Haidt's new book, The Anxious Generation. I don't know. Have you heard anything about the book besides what I've told you about it?
No, I haven't.
Well, he basically saying that there's a mental health crisis but in children and adolescents that we see started around 2012. And he is blaming this crisis mostly on the fact that we have been overprotecting children in real life and underprotecting them from screens. I think that's his thesis. How does that sound to you?
That sounds like a very good thesis. I'm inclined to agree with him.
I am too, but not everyone is inclined to agree with him since
No,
it is very hard to pinpoint causes for things like this, like mental health crisis. So
absolutely.
I guess we could start talking about um, how do scientists can tell if there's a mental health crisis, and how can they start narrowing down the possible causes for a crisis such as this? Illuminate the
Yeah.
science for us.
Yeah, that's a good question. These are hard. With these complex systems, like what causes anxiety, we know that's not a simple biological thing. It's not a simple environmental thing. It's not a simple dispositional thing. There are lots of factors with any of the mental health stuff. Nutrition and well-being is another of these interesting categories where it is really hard to pinpoint what causes what, especially for any given individual, because even if there are group regularities, we're also very different in some relevant domains. What might cause anxiety in you might be exciting or fun for me, or vice versa. I believe I've got somewhere a photo of you just before getting on a roller coaster, and clearly you are in an anxious state,
Yes.
whereas I'm not going to have that reaction. But so how do we go about doing this as scientists? Making it even harder, I guess, with the scientific work is these are often take time to develop. So it takes time for a mental health crisis to start developing. And so you have to track that over time. Well, whenever those require longitudinal studies, and those are always difficult to administer. They're expensive. There are all kinds of pragmatic problems. And then most importantly, when it comes to humans, we can only exercise so much experimental control, as it is known, right? So when we're trying to pinpoint causes, the scientific gold standard for establishing a cause is doing fully randomized controlled experiments. So we've got a control condition and we've got a treatment condition. In this case, it would be something like, okay, in the treatment condition, we're going to expose these kids to screen time, lots of digital devices and screens. And these other kids, we're going to make sure have none. But otherwise, they've been randomly assigned to those conditions. Well, you can see very quickly that experiment's never going to happen, because who has a colony of kids that they can randomly assign to one condition or the other, completely random, right? No. And parents aren't going to say, oh, yeah, you can randomly assign half of my kids to one and half of my kids to the other. No, you can't do that. We all live in the same house. They're pragmatic as well as ethical problems with fully randomized, fully controlled experimental designs with humans, especially of a longitudinal sort that would be required here. So there's always going to be some fuzz in the conclusions we can draw. We'll always have to be a little bit tentative. So that's the problem. What's the scientific solution? What will lead somebody like Jonathan Haidt, who is a very good researcher, to draw these kinds of conclusions? Well, we're going to triangulate using as many methods as we can and see, do their findings converge? Okay, so we'll do cross-sectional studies, as they're called, which just means a snapshot in time, looking at kids of different ages, who have had different levels of exposure to the variables that are plausible causes for a certain outcome in both directions. So those things that could cause anxiety. And then we'll try to statistically control for as many of these variables as possible. Those that we can't experimentally control for, we will statistically control for. So we'll do that. We will look longitudinally at when do certain technologies enter the world of children, and over time, do our measures of anxiety change and have inflection points that seem to correspond, for instance, to those when these new technologies start spreading and becoming popular? We will turn to naturalistic experiments, they're sometimes called, or quasi-experiments. This is where just by forces outside of the control of the experimentalist, it may be the case that, for instance, two communities get, say, the internet at different times, just because of when the fiber optic cables or when a new tower was put in or whatever it is, whatever the delivery mechanism. It hit this village, but not that one, or this town, but not that one. But otherwise, the two are pretty comparable. And we might go, okay, what's the difference between the two then? At least initially. So those are kind of naturalistic experiments. They work better when you have these what are sometimes called islands, populations that are somehow a little bit separated from each other. Whether on literal islands or not isn't the point. The literal islands are great if you can do that. Yeah. So there, and then I think what wraps around all of these different kinds of studies is trying to see, well, do we have independent reason for thinking that the proposed causal mechanisms really could do what we're suggesting they do? And that you might get from lab studies, whether on humans or animals or whomever. So you might, have kids or, experimentally put kids in front of screens for shorter periods of time and see, all right, are we plausibly getting things? And do we understand anything about the mechanisms that make these reasonable interpretations of the data that we're seeing? So you kind of have to build a cumulative case, and there may be cracks in that cumulative case, but it's the best that we can do with these complex systems. And eventually, over time, we can get some reasonable confidence. But you're absolutely right that there will always be a little bit of a, yeah, are you sure? And we're like, well, not 100%, but it's a pretty good, well-informed, scientifically informed supposition at this point. Now, is that the case with this topic, right? So as I understand the thesis, we are overprotecting kids when it comes to the real world and underprotecting them when it comes to screens, and that leads to anxiety and other kinds of mental health issues. Am I capturing this right?
Yes. Yes.
On the screen side of things, I think you have a better grasp of the literature than I do. Because you've been studying that. But I guess my initial reaction is that the reason why I find this plausible from the beginning is if you think of our human psychological equipment, our whole selves, our biology, the way that we think, the way that we grow up normally. If you think of it as in some ways crafted or designed for particular kinds of environments. And you can do that either from an evolutionary psychology perspective. You can say, yeah, the vast number of ancestral humans would have had to work in these kinds of environments, hunter-gatherer societies or whatever, small-scale societies, or, we can work on those details. Or if you're saying, or God created us with particular kinds of natural propensities so that we would have the tools to function well in the kinds of environments that humans are typically going to find themselves in. Either way you go, or a combination of the two, that works too. There's reason, we'd say a priori reason, in advance reason to think humans are going to be well equipped for natural environments because
Yeah.
that's what we're suited for.
Hmm.
Screens are not part of those natural environments historically. We would have to adapt to them in some way. So already there should be a favoring of natural environments over screen environments, right?
But people somehow believe that children are adapted to those environments. And I think that's a very interesting thing you can help us dispel, because I don't think that's the case, that in a generation our children's brains are equipped to handle the type of stimuli we find coming from screens. But people speak like that, like they are the digital natives or whatever.
Yeah, there behind all of that, there is a misunderstanding of children's minds. So
Hmm.
that's been a part of sort of popular Western culture for at least 100 years, more like at this point, probably 150 years or more. And that's the idea that children are just sponges,
Yeah.
or the fancy term was tabula rasa, blank slate. Um, that they can learn anything equally well, that they just absorb whatever is in their environment. And so if we put them in a digital environment, they'd go, okay, if that's all they know, okay, I can do that too. That's the popular view, I think, whether people articulate it or not. That's the way that we talk a lot. And our educational systems seem to work on this premise too, right? It's like,
Mm.
oh, if kids are going to succeed in school, we just have to change the environment of the school. I'm like, well,
Mm.
no, it may be that you're trying to teach them the wrong things at the wrong time. No, 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 no. It's
Mm.
just motivation and focus and attention. And oh, okay, yeah, they need enough food that they're not, starving to death and stuff. So we'll give them, breakfast when they show up. And oh, they need naps. Okay, fine. But that's just all of that is to make sure that their brains are working well enough so that they can learn anything we throw at them. Again, that's based on that idea that anything we throw at them, they can learn equally well at
Mm.
any age. It just takes motivation. Well, that's not what developmental science has shown us. Instead, like any other animal, oh no, we're animals. Um, like any other thing that breathes and eats and moves and has cells and
Yes.
organ systems, animals, uh, we also have behavioral and learning propensities
Mm.
that are part of our nature. We're going to find some things easier to learn than others. So I like to give the example, even though it makes people, because it makes people uncomfortable.
That's why I won.
It gets people, they get it. Like fear of snakes is a great example.
Mm. Yeah.
So it is so easy to make a baby afraid of snakes.
Hmm.
There's a little bit of evidence that already just the movement of snakes, we've got a natural propensity to go, okay, that's just, I'm not that little
Yeah.
wiggly thing they do that just makes me uncomfortable. But we have very clear evidence that if mom or dad react in fear to a snake, the kid sees that, now they're afraid of snakes. It can happen in a single pairing. They can socially learn that so quickly, and not just humans, but other animals that have never seen a snake before. So these experiments have been done on captive monkeys in zoos who have never seen a snake before. Show them a video of, another monkey reacting in fear to a snake. Now they're afraid of snakes. It's that easy. They've got, the jargon of the field is preparedness. We've got preparedness to learn some things over others. Okay, so we've got a natural disposition to make certain kinds of fear associations in the case of snakes and spiders, not flowers. We don't become afraid of flowers easily. So there are, and that's one example. Other examples, we all tend to divide up, we tend to see colors the same way, regardless of culture. Some people misunderstand this. They think that the words we have for colors changes the way we perceive colors, and that is false. It changes the way we remember colors. So,
Okay.
Expert painters and fashion people, I showed that book, right, who learn a lot about different kinds of colors and they develop a color vocabulary. They can be more precise in remembering colors because they have more conceptual anchors for those different color shades and intensities and so forth. But it's not that they perceive the color differently initially. And experiments with babies. You can do this with infants, and they have been done with infants, and showing them color panels on the screen that are systematically varied along certain what are physical dimensions of the wavelength of light they're getting. You can show that they actually see boundaries where the typical adult sees boundaries in the color. So when we look at a rainbow, we see bands of color. We see, and that's called categorical perception. We group it into bands of color, even though, the smart aleck physicist will tell us all the full spectrum of color is there. Well, our brain doesn't see the full spectrum of color. It naturally divides that up. It's an example of where, again, our cognition has natural propensities in a certain direction that makes us see things similar kinds of ways. We learn those, these basic primary colors simpler than if you came up with a different system. Natural language is another example. The languages that we speak, Spanish, English, that kind of easy to learn for kids. Binary code, you could try to teach them binary as a language, and they're just not going to learn it the same way because their brains are not wired for it. Okay, and we can spin out lots of these examples. The whole point of them is babies are not just a blank slate or a sponge that can absorb anything. So they've got natural propensities to learn some things over others. They're going to be naturally more receptive to certain kinds of environments than others. And that means some are going to feel really good for them. I'm going to oversimplify. So feel really good. Okay. And they will thrive and flourish in those. And others are going to be stressors. Okay. And those stress-inducing environments, they could lead to problems down the road. Now, all that said, are babies amazingly adaptive and flexible? Our little kids? Yes, absolutely. That is a remarkable feature of humans, is that we've got a lot more ability to adapt, it seems like, than many other species. That's cool, but let's not over-exaggerate that ability, and that there is no cost at all.
Yeah.
There are costs eventually if you push too far outside of what's normal and natural. And that's one of the fears of the digital screens, is it's doing something visually, it's doing something interactively, especially socially, that we're just not well designed for. Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, there's something that came to my mind, is that there's a difference between adapting to something that is harmful, but is there, it's present, so you have to learn to live with it, and thriving or flourishing in the way you were designed to flourish, your systems, your cognitive systems, your physical systems. Right. So
that's a good distinction. Very good. Yeah.
Kids can adapt themselves to this digital environment that is feeding them tons of content, entertainment, just as they can adapt to surviving for a while, eating chips and soda and cake every day, all day, but they're not going to flourish. They're not going to develop in the way they were meant to develop if they had a healthy environment where they could thrive.
Right. That is a good way to put it.
So the Anxious Generation, they have a website. We can check it out. Yeah, it's scary.
Those are some upsetting.
That's the point, because that's the things our children are exposed to. And they have different sections. There's a section on research, evidence. People can get through the studies they have used to support their thesis. Again, I've checked them out and they seem legit. And there's the book, and there's art also. They're doing exhibitions and different forms of communication, not only interviews and stuff, but trying to get people's attention to this epidemic of mental health that is mostly through social media and screens and things like that. And people can go to the book and check all the evidence out. but I like that he doesn't stay in the, okay, we're doomed, this is a problem. He proposes some solutions, and I would like to spend a few moments discussing those solutions and seeing what you think about them.
Okay.
He says, how can we free the anxious generation? Roll back the phone based childhood. This means delaying children's access to smartphone until high school and social media until 16 years old. Schools need to go phone free. And then restore the play based childhood. I think you could teach us a little bit about that. Why is play important, and how is it different from what kids do on screens? And then reclaim life in the real world, replacing screen time with real world experiences. And he condenses this in 4 new norms: no smartphones before high school, no social media before 16, phone free schools, and more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. I think that's the strategy he proposes, and I think it's pretty solid. I would go even older than high school and 16 for phones and social media, to be honest. My sons
Ooh.
are still very young. One of my sons is 12, and he doesn't even have a tablet. He doesn't play video games because, yeah, I've seen what these types of platforms do to children's brains, and I don't like it, so I just avoid it completely. And my younger son is 5, so he's not even not even a tablet. They watch TV a few times a week, but that's it. But I guess for and it's true that I live in a culture that is a little bit behind of the United States regarding technology. We don't
Behind in a good
not
way.
Yeah. I mean, in a good way because we're poor, I guess, but that's a good thing because we don't have money to buy smartphones to 5-year-olds. um, but
Yeah.
these trends are coming to our Latin American countries too. Like children are getting smartphones younger and younger, and that's not good. Anyway, what do you think about all these?
Well, they sound pretty good to me. I mean, people might quibble about exactly when the numbers are,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
okay. And that's okay. And that's not really what's important. But the idea of, uh, first of all, little kids not having these digital devices, phones and tablets, smartphones, tablets, when they're young, absolutely, we shouldn't. It is horrifying to me what bad behavioral habits we see little kids getting into, infants, toddlers. These things are, it's like giving your kids drugs.
Yes.
But it's also, as parents, conditioning yourself away. You drug your kid and it rewards you because they stop bothering you instead of learning
Yes.
how to interact with them effectively. And that's usually what they want when they're sort of bothering you. They want your attention. They don't want to be babysat by a digital device. They actually want human interaction. And that's what little kids growing up need. So it's really upsetting to me to see how much parents have used those devices as babysitters, basically. And we don't need to. But it's easy. And I get it. In certain social environments, we get embarrassed and we go, oh, I got to shut the kid up. So here, look at my phone. Bad habits. That's like saying, oh, you need to shut up. Here's some sugary soda. That's terrible for
Mm-hmm.
kids. Or, oh, you'll only be quiet in the grocery store if I buy you a toy. I'm going to buy you a toy. No, don't. Stop it.
Hmm. Yeah.
You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you. Your embarrassment. You can do better. Um, so I'm totally on board with that. But you had a specific question of
Play. Yeah.
play.
Because one of the things he says is that, um, well, he explains about how play is integral to development, that
Yeah.
humans have long childhoods because they learn how to be part of our social communities and stuff while they're children through play. And that if we remove that play, they're not getting the understanding they need to become useful members of our community. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, play is, so this is something we have in common with some other animals. If you spend a lot of time with animals, you know, or just watching videos online, I guess is what people will do. Animals, especially group animals, play with each other. They play fight. They play at all kinds of different things. They wrestle around and stuff, and so do little kids. They've left to their own devices. Little kids pretend to be grown-ups. They pretend to be animals. They play fight. They wrestle with each other, not to hurt each other, but just enjoyment. And there are lots of developmental benefits of this play activity, it appears. Right? So play is one way of building our imagination. It's helping us take perspective. If I were this, I would think like this. If I were a dog, what would I want? What would I do? How would I behave? If I were a firefighter, what would I do? How would I think? How would I behave? If I were mommy, how would I think? What would I do? How would I behave? They're exercising their brain as well as their social interactions with each other, entering into these imaginary spaces. They're exercising their bodies by doing these. Okay, we're going to crawl around on the floor like a dog, or we're going to wrestle with each other. I'm learning where my body is in space, how to coordinate my movements. Even some of the rough play that a lot of parents, and especially I feel like in my experience, grandmothers feel very squeamish about.
Yeah.
It's probably good for them to tune up, well, what is going to get me hurt? Okay, I won't do that anymore. Or
and what's going to hurt others? Yes.
What's going to hurt others? Okay, that was going too far. I need to learn those boundaries.
Yes.
And I'm not going to learn those by you just telling me about them. I have to actually experience some of these things. And play does that. But notice that those kinds of play are unstructured. They're free flowing. They are dynamic. That's what keeps it from me. That's what makes it play instead of a structured game or sport. And too much in at least North American society, instead of letting kids play, we try to structure all of their interactions.
Yeah.
We are going to invite Johnny over and we're going to play this board game, or we're going to play this video game, or we're going to play soccer or football.
And we're always meddling, resolving conflict ourselves and things like that.
Yeah. And we're giving them too much structure so that then they're not problem solving. They're not they're not imagining. They don't have to do any of that work. We're doing it for them. Even the toys that we give kids sometimes don't do them any favors because they're too good.
Yeah.
Right. Our manufacturing has developed to the point that you don't have to pretend that a cardboard box is a castle anymore. Yeah. You will just buy the kid a castle. Like, and
it's a castle and just a castle. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's a one-use toy, basically. And their imagination doesn't have to imagine that this part of the cardboard box structure is the turret. And this part, we're going to make this into and they don't, not only their imagination, but their problem solving in terms of how can I make the cardboard box look more like a castle to facilitate my imagination or whatever I would need to do with it. There really is, it sounds, like we're sounding like two old people sitting on a porch. Well, in my day, we had sticks and rocks. Well, there's something really great about sticks and rocks.
Yeah.
A little thing that isn't obvious about that difference between the natural world and the digital world too is the natural world is actually richer. It gives more sensory information. It gives more visual information. It's more detailed. It's more contoured. Digital worlds, even with our fancy high definition screens these days and, these, computer games or video, straight video, it's still a simplification of the real world. It's still reducing the amount of information. And so our perceptual systems, if all they're bathed in constantly is a simplification, they're missing out on lots of on the full range of natural stimulation. And you're going to atrophy your visual, auditory, and other sensory processing, especially because digital is lousy for things like smells and touch. and things, which is a
Yes.
really important part of especially little kids' development, but all of us. It keeps our aging brain alive too when we're touching and
Hmm.
feeling and adapting to different leveled surfaces. And urban environments already started reducing the amount of sensory diversity we have in the world around us. Digital environments reduce it even further.
Yeah.
Um, and and that's not good for any of us, little kids or grown-ups for that matter.
Hmm.
So play, yes, play outside, play unstructured, parents butt out as much as you can.
Yes.
I mean, don't let them light things on fire and stab each other with it. But
Yes.
if we from the beginning are incrementally letting them and playing with them, if we're playing with them in the right way, they start learning the boundaries from us. But too many parents don't want to play with their kids either. They want somebody else to play with their kids or to
Yeah.
manage. And yeah, it hurts sometimes the older we get too. But get on the
Yeah.
floor and play with the kids, for crying out loud. And um,
Yeah. 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 You mentioned something that I think it's important about this being the case, the necessity of play and being stimulated in the right way by the right um, environments. That is true for children, but it's also true for adults. And this is something that I have noticed in Jonathan Haidt's communication of this issue. He's all about the children, and I understand that because children in some ways are more vulnerable. Their brains are still developing. Um, and and it's still a challenge because when you tell a parent no phones until high school, no social media until 16, that's already um, getting into sensitive territory. People don't like to be told what to do as parents. People are accustomed for the last few years. Everything has been like, you're doing great, no judgment, and things like that with parenting, which any thinking person know it's absurd. There are wrong things, there are good things. We should be able to point out the wrong things and correct ourselves. I mean, we all need to learn. But again, this is all very sensitive. So, of course, Jonathan is getting some pushback about, as you said, the exact dates of when to give, exact years of when to give phones or social media. And as you said, the exact number is not important, but the idea of helping our children as much as we can have a childhood and an adolescence where they can actually thrive and develop. But, anyways, these things also affect adults. And Jonathan Haidt has refused to talk anything about it. It's just as if 18 is like a magic age where your phones and your screens are not going to affect you anymore. But I believe that anyone who is listening to us and owns a smartphone and has an internet connection can attest to the fact that these technologies also affect our brains. But I think this is a very American thing, where you cannot, for any reason, tell any adult what to do in their personal life because freedom and things like that. And I value freedom too. I mean, I appreciate the American way about respecting individual freedoms and all of that. But we should be able to point out things that are damaging for ourselves, even as adults. And one of the things I enjoy the most talking about in my own platforms, YouTube channel, and books and articles and stuff is how screens and social media are damaging us as adults because our brains are still susceptible to all the things that technology are designed to do. They are designed for compulsive use, and every one of us can develop this behaviors that keeps us trapped in this technology spaces. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, because I am I feel like the adults wanna go the route, okay, protect the children, but we can do whatever. It's like, no, you know that this is affecting you too. You shouldn't be careless with the way you use your technology, even if you're an adult.
yeah, I think you're right. And so if I were to try to talk to Americans who value freedom, I'd say, yeah, absolutely. But remember that our whole society, of the reason that we have freedoms is because we also have responsibilities. And in
Mm.
this case, it's responsibilities to ourselves. Yes, you are free to mess yourself up. But should you mess yourself up? Do you
Mm.
really want to mess yourself up? And I think people do get their back up if they are worried that the people in charge are going to bully us and they're going to take things away from us.
Yes.
So let's take a different approach, which is the more of the, well, what do you want from your life? What is going to make your life rewarding, fulfilling, and really a thriving life? Well, my guess is most people would say that, well, I want to have really good relationships. I want to have good friendships. I want to have good relationships with my family members. I want to have good marriages. I want to have great relationships with my kids. I hope that's what most people will say because we're relational beings. It's part of what we are. We know we were created to love other people well.
Mm.
That's kind of what we're called to do. Okay, well, if you want to do that well, here's a question. How is your time spent on digital devices improving your relationships?
Mm.
How is it building your capacity to love other people well and be loved well? What the research seems to suggest is it's probably not doing that.
Yeah.
In fact, it's probably getting in the way of that. Pretending that it does that. We call it social media. See, it helps me have lots of relationships. No, that's not what the research shows. It shows that it lets us pretend that we're having relationships with lots of people that we don't actually engage with.
Yeah.
Because real relationships require us to spend time interacting in real time, face to face. And we're doing that now. But this wouldn't be based on any relationship if we hadn't spent any time together in real life as well.
Yeah.
So we need to do that too. Why? Well, because a relationship isn't just about communication. It's not just about exchanging words. It's about reading each other's body language. It's about giving hugs. It's about eating together. It's about playing together. It's about going through life and having adventures together, things that you're not doing digitally. That's not the real world. It's about solving problems together. So if having good relationships is a part of what you want your life to be, the smartphone is not helping. Probably, it's probably getting in the way. I mean, how many of us have been trying to have a meaningful conversation with somebody and they are checking their phone constantly? And that becomes a barrier. And they're not trying to be rude and they're not trying to ignore us. They're just in a habit.
Yeah.
As you say, there's something almost addictive about it. We're getting these little, oh no, I've got to pay attention to this. And smartwatches are even worse, right? Because now I can't even put the phone away. It's like, my wife actually, she had smartwatch-ish thing. I think it was a knockoff brand, but it died, or she left it somewhere, and we had good reason for her to keep it because of the kind of work she does. She does this line dance instruction, and she could start her music from here instead of having to walk over to the other side of the room and stuff.
Handy.
And so we thought, okay, we're going to replace this. It's a really handy tool, but we didn't. And now it's been over a year. Now she's really glad she didn't, because she doesn't have this constant distraction on her wrist that's constantly interrupting her and taking her out of real life interaction with other people.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's also the, hey, do you want to age well? That's the social part. But do you want your brain to keep functioning well into your 80s and 90s? Well, we don't have good reason to think the phones are going to help that. And we've got growing reason to think they're going to hurt. So instead of telling people, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this, it's like, how do you imagine the good life for you? Does that thing really fit in it? Or does that really fit in the good life for the companies that manufacture these products and keep selling them to us? So I would take more of that approach, but you're so right that adults, even if we're mostly concerned about the kids are going to do what the adults are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very hard, especially as kids get into their teens, to keep telling the kids, you can't do this, but I can do this.
Yeah.
So you can't be on social media, but I'm going to let social media consume my life. Like, what?
Yeah.
No, set a good example. And are there some things that adults will do that teens shouldn't? Absolutely. There's going to be some of that. I mean, we won't typically let a 13-year-old drive a car, but a 25-year-old can drive a car. And we've got good reasons for that. Well, let's be able to defend those good reasons, share those good reasons, because the typical 15-year-old is going to start saying, well, okay, wait, why am I not able to drive the car? Or whatever it is, or consume alcohol, for instance. And it's like, well, because some of these things actually have to be used with great care. Whether you think they're good or bad, they still have to be handled with great care. And it takes practice handling these things with great care. Well, if they don't see you handling them with great care, they're not going to believe you.
Yeah.
It is a little bit like, the alcoholic telling the kid, yeah, never go anywhere near alcohol, but I'm going to drink it every hour on the hour. Like,
yeah,
you're not a trustworthy source of information on this. I mean, you kind of are, because it's sad, but most alcoholics in that situation they're alcoholics and thinking, and it's not hurting me. I'm okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm the exception.
I'm the exception, but you're not.
Yeah.
So I can use the digital device like an addict, but you can't. Well, no.
Yeah.
Demonstrate that you know what your sharp boundaries are, but not just in the. Sorry, it's easy to get preachy on this stuff, but the other side of it is, for what? For what positive stuff do we want to liberate ourselves from our addictions to digital media? It's so that we can have better relationships. We'll model that. Model just having good interactions with other people as well. Yes, put the phones away, but to do what? Well, maybe so that you really do continue to play as grown-ups. Have fun and good social interactions with other people, that you're investing in relationships, that you're bettering yourself, that you are playing with your kids more. You're putting the digital devices away so that you can engage with them. So I think it's the boundaries, putting boundaries on ourselves freely, because it will help us to have the life that we want, and then putting that new life on display for our kids so that they get, oh, I see what you're doing there. I respect it.
Yeah, I agree. And an important thing that we don't often think about is that a lot of the things we say we want out of life, we can have them. We could have them. Like, if you ask the average person, if you had a weekend completely off to do whatever, and you had no limits on the money you can spend or whatever you can do, people would say, I don't know, I would go to a remote place and just walk on the beach, or just, and there are very simple things that maybe not in that, maybe you are not going to Hawaii this weekend, but you can go walk in the park and sit down under a tree and read a book, or spend the afternoon playing games with your children. And those are things you say you want, but you don't do, because we are all on our devices. And even when we put them away, the taste for the good things in life has gone away from us. It's just like with food. If you eat a ton of junk food every day, you're going to lose the taste for good meat and good roasted vegetables and a sweet strawberry, because you're used to the sugar of a milkshake or the saltiness of chips. And even though they make you feel terrible, like physically and both mentally, because you know they're bad for you, and physically because they are bad for you and they're making you sick. But they are designed, these foods, to just be addictive, and you keep eating them, and then you are presented with a good meal, and it tastes bland to you because you've lost taste for what's good. So you need to stop it with the junk food for a while, and have your taste be recovered by a slow process, right? And it's the same thing with our enjoyment outside of the digital world. The digital world has conditioned us for this dopamine whatever rushes that we get through the stimuli and the comments and the short videos and such, that when we say, okay, I'm going to stop for a while and I'm going to go for a walk, you're anxious, you're not enjoying the walk. I'm going to read a book, you cannot focus on the book. I'm going to play with my children, it's boring, I don't want to do this, even though in theory I want to do this, but I don't want to do it because I've lost taste. And you need to wash yourself out of this addiction you've developed for these tastier junk food content you've consumed. So I think that is really important for people to understand. We feel sick, we feel annoyed, we feel bored, we don't like how these technologies make us feel and think and act, but we're used to it. So we need to take the time we need to gain again the taste for real life. I think that's important.
No, well said. Yeah, we have to detox. We have to
Yeah.
detox ourselves, and sometimes it requires social support. So I think this is
Yes.
one of these situations where it's probably going to be helpful for both the kids and grown-ups to wean themselves off of the overconsumption of digital technology in these devices if we do it in
Oh,
community
yes.
groups. So this is a
Yes.
place for churches to step up and say, you know what? We're not going to force this on anybody. It's not a salvation issue. It's not a you're a sinner if you don't, but it's better for us if
Yeah.
we do this. So let's make a pact. Let's those who want to sign on board that we're going to try to not give our kids, digital devices before age 16. We're
Yeah.
not going to have them interact with each other and organize that way. And we're not going to, or we are going to set a better example in the following very specific sorts of ways. Let's try to
Mhm.
covenant to do that together for, a 6-month period and see how it goes. My guess is you're right that after you get past the detox, it's like, oh, wow, life is so much better now that I
Yeah.
don't have this thing sort of nagging at me and sort
Yeah.
of causing me anxiety constantly because
There's a
um,
great resource for that called, the organization is called screenstrong.org. They have great resources for families and churches and communities, because this is important to do, yes, in community. Doing it alone is the worst, when every other kid has a device and your child has to be the only one left out of every joke or every whatever they're doing. It's hard. But when we get together and try to build something better for our children, it's much easier. So going to screenstrong.org, not sponsored again. There, I'm an ambassador there. I just love their work. I think we could get resources there to, in community, develop this new practices. And I don't like the word detox, even though it's common and even Screenstrong uses it, because at least in the last few years of social media, and people have realized how harmful it is. It has become like a trend to do a social media detox for like a week or even a month. But it's more like, oh, I'm going to be off these horrible platform for a week, and then I'm going to feel great because I'm free, and then I'm going to come back and do exactly the same for like 6 months, until I'm collapsing with anxiety and depression and whatever else, and then I'm going to do another detox. And that's stupid. That's
no, that's
dumb.
not it. Yeah.
We don't want to live like that. um we want to take in the technologies that actually serve us to thrive and develop into the persons we were made to be. So I'm having a harder and harder time to think that social media is even a small part of that for most people. I mean, we can talk about that in another episode when my book comes out. But I think the harm certain technologies do to us is non-justifiable to even have them be even a small part of our lives. It's just too much. Anyways, the important thing here is to remember we were made to thrive and develop with people, using our lives for the glory of God and the good of others. And some technologies are just harming us. Try to stopping us to do that, so we can just not be a part of whatever these technologies want us to do. And of course, we can protect our children because they're more vulnerable. Their brains are still developing. They don't know right from wrong. And that's why we're the adults and the parents that can help them and guide them in this process.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Justin?
I would only just sort of highlight what you just said in terms of you got to do it anyway. It can't be an intermediate detox, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
That's not going to work. The importance of doing this in community, it is so hard if your kids are the only weird ones. But my only little footnote on that is it's a good muscle to exercise being the weird kid too.
Yes.
So we don't use, oh, but my kids will be left out as an excuse. Because so many kids, well, it's good if your kid is left out of the thing that is harmful to them.
Yes.
And it's good for them. And especially those of us who are Christ followers, we're called to be different. And if we are uncomfortable with being different, we're not living into that call that Christ has put before us in a full-bodied way. We need to be willing to step out and go, no, this is something that in my house, we're not doing this. And it does not matter. It's okay to be the weird kid sometimes. We don't want to make them unnecessarily weird, and a social pariah and all of that. But if it's clear, this is a harmful thing, I'm not going to do it. I don't care if all the other moms are doing it. I'm going to do the right thing here. And my kid is going to learn that there's some value in being different. We're called to be different. We're called to be set apart in some ways. Not out of pride, but out of, it's just, we're going to do the right thing. We hope other people will do it with us. But if they don't, that's okay. As for me and my house, we'll follow, we'll choose the Lord's way on this.
Amen. Thank you, Justin. I think this is a very broad conversation that touches on a lot of things, and we can continue to discuss these topics. If people who are listening have any questions, anything specific they want us to get into, please leave a comment. But for now, this was our conversation. We'll see you next time.